Craft beer is an industry that's growing at a fruitful rate. More and more breweries are popping up with extravagant flavours and eccentric packaging, but most importantly, great quality beer. I went to find out about the in-demand craft beer industry. Firstly, I went to learn about how craft beer was made, starting at the Red Willow Brewery, Macclesfield.
I'm going to talk to you a little bit today about the brewing process. There are 4 main ingredients in beer. That is malted barley, so that's a grain that comes from a field, and then it's been taken to a malter, who are basically going to steep the beer to kind of freeze germination, and that will help the sugars grow and contain them within the husk, and then they'll toast it to a specific degree. Darker beer is usually made with darker malts. We'd begin every morning about 8 AM and would start do a process called mashing in, which is basically for wort production. So what we do is we use the auger, which is here. We tip the grains into the auger, and this is like a circular, like a spiral, which drags the grain. We've got water coming from the HLT, which is a hot liquor tank over this way, and they're going to meet in the middle. Hopefully we've got all our temperature control correct, so say that's going to be around 77, 78 degrees, depending on what mash temperature and how cold it is. And then they're all going to land in the mash tun at hopefully your desired mash temp. So if you're mashing it at a higher temperature, you'd get a lot more residual sugars, which would give a sweeter, like more full-bodied beer. The beer that we've made today, we mashed it in at 65.5. So yeah, we're going to then transfer the wort that's been in the mash tun for an hour into this, which is the underback. Obviously it's already been transferred, so that's why there's some residual grains in there. And then it transfers up into this, which is the copper. It's heated with electricity, and now the purpose of this process is to bring it up to 100 degrees, hit a rolling boil. The hops that we add at this point are bittering hops, and the purpose of this is basically to add IBUs, the International Bittering Unit. Basically that's a measure of how bitter your beer is. So the beer we've made today, I think it'll be about 40 IBUs, which is a reasonably low bitterness. We're using Citra and Simcoe. Once it hits a rolling boil, we'll add our first addition, so that's the 60-minute addition of bittering hops. Then we'll set a timer. The next addition after that would be at 10 minutes, so that means 10 minutes before the end of the boil. The purpose of these hops is to add flavour and to begin some aroma. We'll reduce the beer to 80 degrees and do what's known as a hop stand. So we'll then smash it with loads of Citra and Simcoe, this particular beer, and we're going to let that stand for half an hour. Again, we're building up the layers of kind of bitterness, flavour, and then shed loads of aroma. Okay, so we've got to the end of boil. We've cooled the wort to 80 degrees. We've done the hop stand. At this point, we'll transfer it. That process takes about an hour, but we also need to cool it. So there's a heat transfer on that side, basically, which we pass the wort through and pass cold water going the other way as well. So it'll cool the liquid from there by the time it hits there. So you're going to hit this at 22 degrees, which is ideal temperature for pitching our yeast. So fermentation with our house yeast is really, really quick. So it'll probably take maybe 4 days to have the beer to like 10.8, 10.12, roughly the gravity points that you want to hit. When it gets to that point, we'll skim the top of the beer. We'll use a sanitized bucket and a scoop and just get right in and take the layer off the top and scoop it into a bucket. They go in the fridge, the yeast goes dormant, and then we can re-pitch that the next day in a different beer. And then as it warms up, it'll get really active again. Once we've skimmed the beer, we do a process called dry hopping. Now, dry hopping just means the hops that you've added during fermentation. We use T90s, which are these things, so the little hop pellets. They smell really citrusy, these ones. These are Citra, so they're really zingy, really citrusy, really lovely and green. If they're kind of new style IPAs and kind of session IPAs and Vermont Pale Ales, we're absolutely smashing them with the dry hops. You don't extract any bitterness really, or very little bitterness. During this time, you're basically going for like full juice, like super aroma, and that's where you get all that super zingy, citrusy kind of flavours coming from. Weightless is our session pale ale. So this was dry hopped 2 days ago. So the aroma of it's great. It's 4.2%, really low bitterness. It's kind of a modern style of pale ale in that it's like really hop forward. There's loads of dry hopping gone into it, so that's all mosaic hop, which like a lovely grapefruit, mango kind of pithy aroma. And it's not been filtered yet. You'll notice it's very hazy. We do leave a slight haze on it, but in the next few days we'll put something in it called isinglass. Basically it traps all the particles and drops any of the kind of haze off it. So it's left with a little haze, but not a super haze. When we taste it, which we do before packaging and before any movements happen, so we're always tasting and smelling the beer just to check if there's any off flavours or anything that you're not keen on. But yeah, it tastes great. Cheers. Also, we leave a little bit of yeast in suspension so that in the cask it goes through like a secondary fermentation. A byproduct of this fermentation is CO2, but the CO2 can't go anywhere, so it's forced into the beer, which is what gives you a cask, a really good cask, a well-conditioned cask. It's nice sparkle. So yeah, if you're pouring it and then you get that lovely fizz, that's because of the secondary fermentation process that's gone on in the cask. Guys in the background here are just sorting out the pressure of the tank, so all the pressures are right for making the canned product land in the can exactly the way we want to do it. As you fill in the cans, you want to have a layer of CO2 on the top. That protects the beer. Oxygen's really bad for the beer at this stage. It can really spoil it. So it's really important to get the kind of foam levels right on the beer and then to cap it at exactly the right time so that you're not overflowing beer and so you're keeping that level of CO2 on it. So Pete is just messing around with the tank pressure and hopefully everything will run a bit more smoothly.
The manufacturing helped me learn and understand the process better, but also gave me more admiration for the brewers in mastering the operation and the maths and science behind it. I then went to the most popular craft beer bar in the country, Brewdog. I wanted to gain an understanding about taste and flavours in craft beer.
Especially the last sort of 5-6 years, the influx of craft beer has really come to the forefront of the drinks market. People will go to extraordinary lengths to get very limited run beers. People will pay exorbitant amounts of money for small batch beers. It's important to make other people passionate, but it's important to introduce people to it. So Brewdog, we pride ourselves on running what we call beer schools, where we essentially educate and introduce a lot of drinkers who might not be as involved in our culture into our world. So we do very basic taster sessions where we explain the beers and just get to try it in a smaller format where it's not as intimidating. Most popular, Punk. It's our top selling product. We sell so much of it that we have a separate brewery outside the main brewery just to produce this one beer. I always encourage people to try new flavours, especially with the rise of the sour beer market and stuff like that. People are getting more into these off flavours. So a big one for us is the Elvis juice. It's just a grapefruit IPA, and this is it. It's very close in terms of our best sellers. We go through a lot of it, and it's delicious. It's really nice and approachable. But when you start getting a bit weirder, as in the jasmine and cardamom infused Imperial Stout Tokyo, people are willing to try it. They're a lot more accommodating of these off flavours and these non-typical flavours. So this is our classic Punk IPA. We've used modern techniques to bring it up to 21st century. It encapsulates kind of everything we stand for in a company. We've packed it with loads of New World hops. So we've got stuff like Centennial, Columbus, Nelson Sauvin, which gives it that really classic citrusy, piney kind of just delicious appeal to it, but you've got that underlying bitterness behind it as well. I mean, hopefully it speaks for itself, hopefully you've had it before.
I visited Olm Brewery Bar to find out more about the industry within Manchester and being a nano brewery.
Being a nano brewery is really good. It gives us kind of the freedom to experiment a bit more with having smaller batches. It allows us to certainly experiment with different yeasts, different grains, different hops. The enthusiasm's really high at the moment, certainly in Manchester. So many great breweries popping up. You know, there's a lot of focus on Manchester, certainly in the UK, and it feels great to be a part of that. I mean, it's still quite a new thing in the UK. I mean, I've been to the US quite recently, and it's heavily ingrained over there. Wherever you go into an off-license, there's a huge array of, you know, breweries from all over the US. So it's not so much a new thing over there, whereas over here it kind of feels like we're still kind of growing, which is, you know, what makes it exciting, I suppose. Camera was a big thing in this country with kind of helping the popularity of real ale grow. Whereas now I think it's kind of moved on a lot more since then, and I suppose now you're starting to see that camera crowd kind of warm to the, you know, ever-growing craft beer scene. As hard as it might be to change someone's mind about what real ale should be, it's nice to kind of see, you know, people of an older generation warming to, you know, new styles and new techniques that are being used to brew beer. Creating our own beer is, you know, something that we feel very strongly about in terms of quality. Our beer selection, our guest beers are, you know, we like to put into that exactly what we put into our own beer, in the sense of, you know, having a good base for people to choose from, and not necessarily kind of focusing on one style or, you know, even one country, so to speak. We're currently collaborating with Ancoats Coffee on brewing a oatmeal stout. I mean, in terms of collaborating with other kind of independents is great, you know, because it's kind of helping one another out, learning about each other's processes.
So as I hoped, you've learned much about craft beer in the industry. What's about the future?
It's a really exciting time. The potential is huge. It's going to be, yeah, it could well be amazing, yeah. Like, as far as a beer drinker, especially in the UK, I think it's set up really nicely.